Podcasting from Astrolab Studios, this is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast where we revisit sci-fi, fantasy, and just plain weird shows that have faded from the collective consciousness and didn't quite make the impact that they intended. This week, The Warlord, Battle for the Galaxy, or The Osiris Chronicles.
We are a race, not of blood, but of ideas. Thus, all intimate physical contact between members of the Engineer Society is strictly forbidden. Our genetic experts are striving to perfect a method of single-sex reproduction, while advanced hormonal restructuring will eliminate any sense of gender identity. In this way, we shall eradicate even conflict between the sexes. You're crazy.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast that explores little-known and forgotten science fiction television. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
Not too much. I never know what to say. I'm next time I'm gonna have something really funny to say, like what's new, and I'll be like, well, I don't know. See, I still can't even think of anything. I grew an arm or something.
I'm looking at our producer being like, didn't Jordan prepare a story this week? Our audience is expecting a funny story.
He just came with nothing. So what did you do in the summer? Well, me and the family were in the Swiss Alps.
His agent told me to prompt him with what's real. And he doesn't know anything that's real.
I think we need another catchphrase. Because we've watched so many shows. We're still doing tech war phrases.
Yeah, it's the best one.
It was the best one. Well, I don't know if it was the best one. I think it's the most dear to our hearts.
We'll get into it, but you'll be happy to know that I in my notes, when referring to things in this episode, the only descriptor I could think of was spooge. So I think that's here to stay.
Yeah, spooge was gross.
I mean, there's some gross stuff in this podcast or in this episode where I was just like, yeah, that's well, he kind of just spooges out of there.
So we're today we're talking about a very weird, I guess a TV pilot, movie, depending on how you want to look at it, called The Warlord, Battle for the Galaxy, or The Osiris Chronicles.
Yeah, that was, I guess, going to be the original name of the television series.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever it was released, they had changed the title for the release to Warlord.
Yeah, I know it's we'll get into it, but it's weird that they chose the Warlord because you think, oh, the main character is the Warlord. It's not. He's not the Warlord.
It is interesting. It definitely went through some work trying to figure out how to make this like standalone, and even in the version we saw, I mean, it did feel still like a pilot more than it did a TV movie.
Well, let's talk about it. Do you want to talk about how this kind of came about?
Sure. Well, how about I say when it came out so people can adjust themselves to where it was? Because it aired on UPN January 27th, 1998.
And it must have already at that time looked old because it was made in 95.
Yeah, it's crazy that they kept it around. I guess maybe they just spent so much money and they were like, we can fill a spot with this at some point. But it definitely didn't look like Voyager would have been on the air by then, I think.
Mm-hmm. It looks much worse than that.
Yeah, definitely. I was trying to think. I'm like, where was I in 98? And I'm like, I guess that's like grade 10 high school.
Yeah, I was probably watching Voyager. Really hoping it was going to be better than it was.
I was like, oh man, that was like my prime time of television watching, but I guess I wouldn't have had UPN, so I would never come across this.
I don't think anyone had a UPN.
But yeah, this was like prime time. I was watching like X-Files, Caroline in the City, Mad About You.
That's what you were watching?
All the best shows.
Grace Under Fire? Were you watching
some Little Grace Under Fire.
Yeah.
This is, I was...
Sybil? Were you watching Sybil? Remember Sybil Shepherd's show?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think this is probably the year I moved into my own room in the basement of our house.
Oh, yes. You've talked about that before.
Yeah, and I found the black and white TV in my closet, and I just would watch everything I could get on little antennas in the basement.
How was Sex in the City in black and white?
Oh,
not Sex in the City. What do you call it? Caroline in the City.
Caroline in the City? Great. I love that show.
Yeah?
I watched it all the time. A big Caroline fan.
Oh, nice. She was a cartoonist. Wasn't that the plot?
I think so. Yeah, that's right, because the whole opening was her little cartoon character. She was like if Kathy had a creator.
Yeah, she was a real time slot hit.
She really was. Yeah. And then, yeah, I think you're right. There was everything else that followed that was, what, The Single Guy? Was that one? Mm-hmm. With Ernest Borgnine?
Oh, yeah, the Single Guy, yeah?
Yeah, these are all shows I watched nonstop.
So this was made in 95, and it was made by Paramount, was the production company. And so what I read was they had made this in the hope of selling it because the X-Files had been big and every major network essentially wanted some sort of science fiction show. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but this is what I read. So Paramount had made this show, and apparently there was a bidding war for this just based on the script. And CBS, I guess, bought it, and they made what was at the time the Osiris Chronicles, and then no one was happy with it when they made it. But I did find, and I'll put it on Instagram, one article on Starlog that talks about this show, and you can see there, like, it's, you know, obviously someone has put it out. They're very excited about making this show, but it's like up there with, like, it's like the X-Files and Voyager and all these new things coming out. It's like, and the Osiris Chronicles. It's like, this thing's not going to make it. You could just see in the article, like, there's no way this show is going to make it. But clearly they were at one point pushing it to be this new big show before, and then it just kind of disappeared.
Yeah. It's funny they refer to X-Files as the big one, because this was, I've read this referred to a few times now, is like the sci-fi boom of the 90s, because Star Trek, Babylon 5, like all these shows were hitting and working.
Mm-hmm.
So there was clearly a big push. And I think when we look at even our list of shows we might watch, so many of them fall in this 92 to 98 time frame, because there really was a huge push in that period.
So what I read was that after they made the pilot, CBS wasn't very happy, and they were trying to retool it over and over. And so they ordered 6 scripts. They read the scripts and said, no, thank you, and just let it die on the vine. And what happened was it sat for so long that the rights went back to Paramount. And so then Paramount was like, what do we do with this? Maybe we can recut this crap into a movie. And they did that in 98, and that's when they put it on the network they owned, UPM, and that's how that aired.
Oh, interesting. Well, I mean, that makes sense. And you can see some elements of a good idea in here. I mean, the creative on it is actually kind of impressive.
When I saw that, I didn't know anything going in. I'm sure you didn't either. And I started watching it, and the director came out. I'm like, Joe Dante?
Yeah, I mean, I know him best from Small Soldiers, but
Gremlins. You got Gremlins. You got The Burbs. You got. He didn't do that much else, but I mean, he did Gremlins.
He's done a lot of stuff. But I'm a big fan of Small Soldiers. Great movie.
That's weird. Wasn't that who was in that? Wasn't that
Tommy Lee Jones was this little soldier man?
But wasn't it Phil Hartman? Is Phil Hartman in it?
Phil Hartman's in it.
Yeah.
It's a good cast, fun little premise. And I don't know how much you looked into it, but if you watch this series, the editors from Small Soldiers, the DPs from Small Soldiers, this movie was shot the same year, or 98 is the same year Small Soldiers came out.
Maybe they just shot this on the weekends.
So I think he pulled that entire crew with him over to this project, because the number of people who have worked with him before, but really on Small Soldiers and this thing, it's really weird, a weird crossover there. I was even looking at a few more of the people involved. Like, we'll get into it, but this is clearly borrowing from other science fiction franchises. Even the production design and costume designer both have worked on Star Trek. Like they were like pulling in people from these like big franchises, trying to like give it that appeal, I think.
And it really worked.
I mean, it has its problems, but I mean, we'll see. And did you see who wrote it? Yeah,
it was Caleb Carr, who I know kind of who he is. I know he wrote The Alienist, which I never have read or seen the show, but I know that's a big hit for him. And I did read a little bit about him on this production, and he was very unhappy. At one point, he didn't edit, the writer, because he just really disliked it. And apparently he was important in the trying to keep this going. Like, he just kept pushing it, and he was still working with Paramount when it was made into a TV movie. He was just like, he really wanted this project to go. I guess it was a bit of a baby for him.
Oh, interesting. Because he's primarily a novelist. This was one of his few TV writing gigs, so obviously he had a lot of care behind it if he kept going with it.
I don't know. The feeling I got, at least from what I read, was that it wasn't what he wanted. For either maybe the budget didn't match up to what he had originally written, or for, obviously the various things that can go wrong with these sorts of things, but he was not happy with it.
Well, it sounds like went through a lot of iterations, so it's gonna degrade over time. Fun Caleb Carr fact I read. Mm-hmm. His father is Lucian Carr.
Who's Lucian Carr?
He was one of the guys involved in sort of the beat poetry generation back with
Allen Ginsberg and stuff?
Yeah, with Ginsberg and all that stuff. In fact, there's that movie Kill Your Darlings, based on They Boil Hippos Live. His dad killed that guy.
Oh.
That's his dad. He killed a man during the Beat Generation, and then they all wrote things about him. They made a movie about him now.
Weird.
Yeah, I was just
why did he kill the guy?
It's a long story, but
we have time.
The explanation that was widely publicized was he was a young man, teenager, and a older man at this university was grooming him and attempting to seduce him. And then at a park one night, he had too much and he murdered him and threw him in the lake or river.
Well, you know what? We've all been there.
However, I also read a few things that say perhaps that's not true, and that was just the narrative he was able to spin. But who's to say? It happened so long ago, and now there's a movie starring Daniel Radcliffe, so that's the truth now.
Well, there you go. So I have a few things, and I'm sure you have some stuff too. Do you mind if I give you a couple of reviews of this?
Yeah, go for it.
So I read a few, and I'll just give some quick ones. And again, this movie got a lot of the... There's got some fun elements of this, but it also has a lot of the problems that we've seen in a lot of these TV movies. So most of the reviews are actually kind of mixed that I read, but I'll just give you the ones that I kind of liked. This one says, it's a bit flat and the plot reads like a summary for a Nintendo game. I like that. This one says, like many potentially great sci-fi flicks, The Warlord suffers from many problems caused by its starvation budget. Which
I don't agree.
You don't agree with that?
I think it had a huge budget.
Yeah, well, I read that the budget for this was $10 million.
Yeah, it looks good, I think.
For what it is. This one, I think you'll like. This review, El Stinko. That's it.
That's all. That's all you need.
And then this one, I'm going to read word for word if you'll indulge me. And the review has the headline, Poor Film, poor with an E, as it's not spelled.
Where's the E?
Poore.
Okay. I thought it was maybe Poer.
Puree film. Okay, so here's the review. Hello, saw this film and do not like it so much. Was a cheap film with cheap performance. This story is quite okay, but it seemed a bit strange to me. Nice is that one antagonist is not and one-dimensional as it seems to be always. Only the CGI was okay for me and the sister seemed very nice. She is so smart, love it. But this film has no real ending for me. Because the film is short, it looks that they ran out of money. Looks like a part 2 to come, but there is none. What do you think of that?
It's very nice. I read a few comments about it too, where quite a few people have been like, it seems to end very abruptly, and where's part 2? And a lot of people
seem to want to. I read a few too.
Seem to understand what they're watching.
Yeah, I know. I saw the same thing. Like, oh, I really want to see what happens, which I think is a little weird because I don't know if the stakes are set so high that you're like, I gotta know what happens at the end of this. But some people felt differently.
There were certainly people I ran across too who were really trying to find where the rest of the story was. Even though, yeah, it seemed like they may not have liked it that much. They really needed to know how it ended.
Right. It's like reading a really bad book and you're missing the last page or something.
You're like, oh, I need to know.
Who killed the guy?
It was the butler, I think.
Yeah, no, it was that guy's dad. What's his name? Joe Carr? What's his name?
Lucian Carr.
Yeah, he's the one who did it.
All right. We'll do the IMDb summary and kind of get into now. But we kind of skipped over this. I'm going to go back to it just for fun. This is where we were in the world when this show came out. I've only got one thing because it wasn't a lot happening that was like super noteworthy around January 27th. But I thought this was appropriate for our show. On January 12th, 19 European nations forbade human cloning. Yeah. Is that still I don't know.
Not relevant. Is it still happening? Like, are you still not allowed to clone people?
I do think there are still rules around that for sure. But I was like, yeah, that's like a thing we'd have to deal with on our show. A lot of human cloning.
I got all my money ready to put in human cloning. I wish they would drop those regulations.
I don't know how much $12 will buy you, but anyway, here is the IMDb summary for The Warlord: Battle for the Galaxy. A galactic civil war has led to a new dark age. Thief Thorpe seeks help from a former rebel, now a warlord, and a former general who wishes to rebuild the Galactic Republic to save his missing sister Nova from mysterious aliens.
Now, I'm glad in that summary that it tells you that it's his sister, because when I watched for the first 20 minutes, I thought it was his daughter.
No, they say it right at the top.
Did they?
No, yeah.
Oh, I missed it because I was like, the relationship seemed like a father and daughter.
Well, that's it. There's a narration right at the top here where we kind of get this introduction to the world of the show, or seeing shots of the galaxy, shots of the universe, and sort of talks about how 300 years ago, Earth civilized the galaxy, created this big galactic republic that basically was a perfect society and there was no one to oppose it, but internal divisions ended up tearing it apart. And the sort of universe has been tossed into sort of a new dark age. Mm-hmm. And in that conversation, they talk about Thorpe, our lead character, played by John Corbett.
Corbett, I think.
Corbett?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Corbett.
I
think it's Corbett.
He talks about how he and his sister were abandoned by their family on this planet. They had a ton of kids, and they left him and his sister on this planet and kind of went off, and now it's just been the two of them living on their own.
Probably Irish.
Space Irish?
Yeah.
But it's funny, this whole sort of setup and backlog, kind of Star Wars-y.
More than a few shades of Star Wars in this.
The first like maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes of this thing really is cribbing a lot of notes from Star Trek. Even when we start off
Star Wars.
Sorry, thank you, Star Wars. Even when we start off here, John Thorpe, our hero, comes across like a floaty hover car being pillaged by bandits, I guess. It looks very much like something on Tatooine.
Yeah.
The car looks like it's from a Star Wars maybe. He goes in and kind of rescues the woman who has been attacked. Her husband's been killed by these bandits, and now they're gathering their things out of the car.
And what I liked was, one, we'll call them bandits. They're like addicted to like hypo sprays or whatever.
They've got hypos with green goo they shove into their neck.
And I think the woman he was saving should be played by Marissa Tomei.
Well, you should talk to Joe Dante about that, because that's a
guess.
Joe Dante special. She's in all of his things.
Who, that woman?
Yep. He puts her in everything he does.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, there you go. Well, I remove my request for
She was
Marissa
in
Tomei.
Small Soldiers.
Was she?
Yeah.
Anyways, but I agree with you that they really crib from a lot of science fiction, and that's not a bad thing, because it's, if you take from good things, you can make something fun. I don't know if it all jives in this, we'll call it TV movie, but yes, this beginning is very Star Wars-esque.
Yeah, and what we see is he's a hero. He saves her. She tells him she's got some valuable like rocket fuel. I think they call it cordonium or something.
Yeah, something stupid, but sure.
And he's going to be able to use that to trade and barter with. And in fact, at some point, he has to shoot one of the bandits who's very high. He's not sure if he's seeing a dream or not. He's so high.
Yeah, he does the thing where he's like, the guy's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm not even here. I'm just part of your imagination." Then he like shoots the guy.
But did you notice what he shoots him with? Is basically Jake Cardigan's gun.
I thought the exact same thing. Yeah,
it's like a pulse gun that just like kind of gives him a little push.
Yeah, it just knocks people over.
Very funny. This is a very popular thing for a hero to have in science fiction. It doesn't kill you, it just gives you a little push.
Yeah.
But this is sort of introducing our hero. He's a bit of a thief and conniver, I guess. He does what he needs to survive and to keep his little sister, Nova, alive.
Yeah.
Now, she's a bit of a child savant, maybe?
Yeah, they push that she's... I didn't know at first if it was just sort of thing that all kids were like this because of a really good education system, but I think the what they're trying to push is that she's like a mini little genius.
Yeah, she's like built a space shuttle or a transpod, I believe they call it. She has a little matrix, which is their home computer, which she deals with.
And they call it the brain matrix, don't they?
Oh, is it the brain matrix? Yeah,
brain matrix.
That's a good name. That's a good name.
I liked it too.
But she's sort of the opposite of Thorpe, who's basically illiterate.
Yeah, I wrote, our lead is semi-literate. That's new. Now, what I assume is that Jake Cardigan also couldn't read, but they didn't make it explicit in the show. But this is our first time we've had a lead who can't read. It's weird that they even pointed that out.
Well, I think it's because it is this dark age, and they're trying to really drive home how smart she is. And you're right. You mentioned you thought it was his daughter. There's a huge age gap between them. She's 9, maybe 8 or 9.
And he's like, what, 40?
I mean, yeah. John Corbett, I think they're trying to imply he's like 22. But he looks well over 35.
Yeah.
And it was a little confusing. I mean, he's a very charming actor.
I don't know if he was the right person cast in this role. Again, this is one of these hard lead roles where we've mentioned it before. I think there's a little bit of a Jake Cardigan effect of we're just supposed to like him just because. This is not as bad as some of the ones we've seen before. He's not as bad as what's his face from Beyond Westworld or whatever, but there's nothing terribly. I mean, they do that whole opening scene where he saves people to be like, oh, he's a hero. We have to support him. But I don't know. Do you think he was good in the role?
Yeah. I
you did,
like John Corbett in the role.
That was okay.
I think he has a natural charm that like makes it work. I mean, I think maybe some of the problems stem from miscasting age-wise. They maybe should have done a rewrite when they put him in there against this like 9-year-old as his sister. There's some things that probably could have smoothed that transition over. I felt overall like he's, he doesn't get a lot to work with, but he's basically a Han Solo type. Like,
yes.
That's what he's doing, and they've at least cast someone with a natural charm in order to pull that off.
Even though the apartment or house they live in is very much like something from Star Wars, like Tatooine, like sort of these rounded doors and rounded like ceilings and all these sort of things. And I didn't actually mind the sets. Like everything has that. It's kind of just a fun science fiction look. Like some of it looks a little better than others. Some of it's a little bit cheesy, but I was fine with it all. At least they tried to create its own world. I
mean, we'll keep coming back to it, but I think the production design overall was pretty solid. I mean, they're definitely cribbing from other things a lot, but it's a lot of thought went into it. It all looks really good.
I don't know if it looks really good.
I think a lot of it looks quite good. I mean, maybe not all of it's as inspired as it could be.
Right.
But, and I think sometimes when they have to do a big outdoor set like we're about to go to, it's tougher because they maybe don't have, they have a lot of money, but maybe not quite enough money to do huge expanses.
Right.
And they've had to maybe cut some corners. They're like, right now, Thorpe takes this cordium, the material he got from the car, to this like crazy market, which feels something like from medieval times, but full of aliens.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it was one of these world building kind of scenes, and it's him going through, yes, like a medieval market or one of these, I don't want to say European market, but something where, there's a lot of vendors in the street and everyone's selling their wares, and some of the wares they really push it. There's a lot of prostitutes.
If it weren't for the aliens, you could see Jesus coming through to throw the moneylenders out of the temple. Like,
right.
It looks like it's from that era. So it's anarchistic. What's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know. It's
like out of time. Like it feels like you're in the future, but what you're seeing is something so far from the past.
Yeah. It doesn't look like everyone's doing terribly well, is what I think they're all sort of outside this. I guess it's a temple or some sort of, I don't know what they call it in this. Do you know what they refer to it as? Because they talk about that there's like a lot of educational materials and stuff in this building.
They call it the archives at some point.
Archives.
And this is where the warlord sort of holds court, basically. He seems to hold it. I mean, and this is maybe one of the problems, is that they clearly couldn't afford to do the actual archives inside. So all you ever really see is the steps up to it.
Yeah, it's funny because they mention it, and one guy at one point is like, "Oh, we need to get that thing from the archives." He's like, "Yeah, I'll go get it," and he just like disappears, and then comes back out with the stuff. You're like, "Oh, I could have seen that cool set," and they're like, "No, he just He's like, there's a cool thing over there, guys. No, don't look at it. Don't look at it. I'll be back.
I can imagine probably the writer has this had written a great idea of like this super technological storage space for all of society's technology in this dark age, just to keep it safe. But they probably it was probably an expense they could spare.
I think you're right. I have a feeling that this was supposed to be a bit of a centerpiece of this world of everyone is sort of living, hand to mouth, and everyone's kind of in rags and their wares. But then you have this very advanced sort of where all the money is going into this one place. But you only kind of get a sense of that from what you're seeing. But I guess the point is that what's the character's name? Our lead? Thorpe. He's going through and people are sort of like, do you want this or do you want that? And he's like, no, I'm on a mission. So he's going to go see Warlord Shane. They pronounce it Sean though. And
Shane?
Yeah, but why I thought it was funny is because I was like, you named your warlord Sean, but I looked it up and it's spelled Xian, so it's like really Jean. But they maybe I just misheard it, but I thought it was funny. Like, so you might as well call him like Warlord Derek or Warlord. Warlord Jeremy.
I enjoyed hearing Sean over and over again. I was like, yeah,
but he's going there because he wants to trade this thing he has to get money so he can.
What does he trade for, Jordan?
Oh, I wrote it down. I'm sorry, I just looked at my one note and I said, lots of intergalactic whores in this area. Oh, and there's one guy doing dentistry on the street. We didn't mention that. One guy was pulling out someone else's tooth. I like that.
See, it's the olden times.
Oh, cordium. Is that it?
That's the name of the thing he's trading.
Okay, well, I don't know what it is.
All right, I'll tell you what he's trading. He's getting 20 months worth of rations for this cordium.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
He's getting 8 Centauri sapphires. Mm-hmm. He's getting 60 ion bursts for his Republican service automatic, and he's getting 12 ounces of refined platinum.
I just knew that he was trading cordium.
He's trading that cordium, and
this is worth a lot because he's getting a lot of stuff.
No, I mean it's a good trade. Shane's not there. Sean.
I thought it was Sean, but we can go with Shane. It doesn't really matter.
I don't know. Sean's not there. Our warlord is not there, so he does this with an underling who's there, and he kind of pulls a better deal because he's so crafty.
Yeah.
So with these spoils, on his way out, he decides to buy his little sister Nova a present, something she's been asking for a while.
Oh, yeah. What was it, though? I don't know if I wrote it down.
She bumps into Dick Miller. Do you know this actor?
Yeah, he's the guy from... He was in both Gremlins movies. Yeah, he's the neighbor.
He's just there as a peddler selling biocrystals.
I liked it. He's got basically... I don't know what you call it, like some sort of rig on his shoulders that... I don't know how would you describe it?
Imagine if you strapped an IKEA shelf to your back.
Yeah, and he's walking down the street with it. See, these sort of things I liked in this movie. I like the silly, that's how he sells stuff.
He's like a medieval peddler.
Yeah,
in this futuristic world, and he sells him a bio crystal, which I guess is a pet in the future.
Was that what they were implying? Oh yeah, because they say at one point, I liked it. He says to his sister, I think she said she wanted a pet or something, and he mentions how, before the Republic fell, people had pets, but now they don't have pets anymore. I was like, why couldn't you have a pet?
Just no, everyone's so poor. Who can afford it? You're gonna eat it.
I suppose. Okay, that makes sense.
I think Dick Miller here even says it's the most beautiful pet you can have. Like, it gives you so much warmth and love, and it's kind of just a glowing crystal he holds. And I wanted to know more information. But yeah, he trades Dick Miller all of the platinum he got.
Yeah.
It was very funny though. He's like, I'll give you 12 ounces of platinum for that. And he's just like, refined platinum?
Yeah, you don't want the unrefined. That sounds terrible.
But when he gets back home, there's a big surprise. The big twist of the first act.
Yeah, old Susie's gone, whatever her name is.
Nova,
yeah.
How could you forget that?
Nova. I have a problem with names. Nova's gone, and we now get to what is basically the plot of the show, which is his sister's gone, and he's got to find her. That's basically the plot.
Yeah, he's trying to find out what happened to his sister. He turns tail and goes back to where he just was, the steps of the archives. Finds Warlord Sean, who's just returned on his ship, the Daedalus. And Sean and him have a very interesting relationship.
They have a somewhat antagonistic relationship, and what it seems like is that Sean is the warlord of this planet. He's ruling it. And for whatever reason, he really likes... What's his name? Thorpe. But Thorpe is sort of like that bad boy. Like, he doesn't really have time for stuff. But at the same time, he sort of sees him a little bit like a usurper a little bit. So they have this semi-antagonistic relationship. Is that how you kind of felt it?
Definitely Thorpe does not like Sean. I think that's clear. But Sean seems to... Yeah, he's concerned about this man who has a bit of charm and kind of is a bit conniving. But he also seems to like really like and respect him too. Like, he kind of is like an older brother looking down on a younger brother.
But he also mentions that everyone that works for him is an idiot. And he's just desperate to talk to someone who might have some intelligence, which I thought was kind of funny.
It is true. Like, he's like, I enjoy talking to you. It's fun when you come by. I don't want you to screw me, but keep coming by.
Yeah. And so and they kind of play with that relationship through this. I don't know if it always is, it always entirely works, because I think sometimes it's like, it would be just nice to have a proper villain or not. But I like that they're doing this thing where they're playing in the shades of gray, where you don't really know where everyone stands.
It's like the review said, it's not a one-dimensional villain.
Is that what the review said?
Yeah, the one you read out loud.
I only was laughing at how bad the grammar was, so I don't remember what the content.
But I weirdly, through the bad grammar, I think they're right. It's like, what we see is, you expect this guy just to be like, I'm an evil man, I'm a warlord of a planet, and like clearly take advantage of people. But there's some charm and there's some back and forth between the protagonist and the antagonist. It really works.
And there's a lot of shades of Riverworld, which we watched way back. Same sort of thing, coming on a planet. There's a warlord ruling things, but in that, the warlord was clearly the bad guy. He was, he wasn't going to team up at a certain point. Obviously, there was other switches in that, but it was funny how there's a lot of shades of that too. Sort of the same tropes are happening.
It's true. They're using kind of that survival of the fittest trope of science fiction, where there's one guy on top and the little guy has to rise up against him.
Right.
Although, really surprisingly, not the way the show goes, but that's definitely the setup anyway. Sean agrees to help Thorpe out. He's going to sort of scan the planet for Nova with his ship. In return, he's going to take back the sapphires that were just like, I like that everything Thorpe got 10 minutes ago, he's kind of like given away.
You can see why they're so poor.
They've tracked everything he spent. There's a ledger. We're all keeping track at home.
Yeah. You're like, hold on. How many dilithium crystals did he buy? I'm saying dilithium crystals. I know that's not what he got, but
the audiences want to know where he spent his money.
Yeah.
But what really comes out of this is one of Shane,
whatever you want to say.
One of Shane's henchmen comes back and says that they witnessed Nova leaving the planet on an interstellar transport willingly. So she wasn't kidnapped. And this really throws Thorpe for a loop. He doesn't know what to do now.
Yeah.
But when he gets back to his home, again, I think he returns one more time to his place.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of just
back and forth between this. He does bump into Nova's friend, a pilot named Maggie Sorensen, and she is there to help out finding Nova because she's realized she's missing. It's very interesting, the age ranges in the show, because Nova, I think we're 8 to 9 maybe?
Yeah.
And then her friend Maggie, who's a
12?
spaceship pilot, I would say 14 to 16.
Okay.
Like there's a big enough gap that it's an odd friendship, but then also Thorpe himself, the brother, is now like...
He's like 63 years old.
Yeah, he's super old. But she's come to help find Nova, and with her, she's brought her grandfather, who's a former Republican general who still dresses in his general outfit.
Yeah, I did like that. It's like, it's just so the audience knows that he's a general, right?
Absolutely. He's a very important man, and you should respect him. But what the general reveals is that he has a ship, an interstellar ship beyond description above the planet that he's held there since the fall of the Republic. The VC Osiris. What does VC stand for?
I don't know what it stands for.
It's the vessel of the Republic.
Oh.
The VC Osiris, as opposed to the USS Osiris, I guess.
Oh, and I just wanted to mention real quick that the general is played by Rod Taylor, who I don't know if you know, but he's one of those actors who has acted forever, and he's just been in stuff like the 50s, 60s, 70s, and he just acted forever. But I did read one little thing that apparently he was a last-minute replacement by Joe Dante. It was supposed to be Christopher Lee, who pulled out last minute because of some sort of illness or something. And not that there's anything wrong with Rod Taylor. I thought he was fine in the role, but it would have been a little bit different movie, I think, if Christopher Lee was in it.
Yeah, it'd been quite something with Christopher Lee in it. It's funny, a lot of the comments I read, there are a lot of people who watch this are just Rod Taylor. Is that his name?
Yeah, Rod Taylor, yeah.
A lot of Rod Taylor fans in the comments were just like, oh, Rod Taylor, I love him.
Yeah. And so, yeah, and I think he's, at the time, was probably a bigger name than anyone else in the movie. I think it was a bit of a get to get him, especially as a replacement. I don't think John Corbett was I know he got bigger later because he was in Sex and the City and stuff like that.
Right, but he'd already done Northern Exposure at this point.
That's true. That's true.
I think he was like...
Yeah, maybe you're right.
He was a good lead to get, I think, for this show. And I think, I could be mistaken, but I think there might be a few of these like sci-fi pilots floating around where he was attached and they didn't quite make it to series. I think people were trying to put him in a role because he has a certain aura that allows you to have a bit of a scoundrel that's likable. Right. So I think they were trying to cast this right, I think. Unlike some of the other shows, I think they tried to cast it well.
I agree.
So Maggie takes them up to see the Osiris. And how would you describe this ship floating above the planet?
It's funny. The first shots, I couldn't tell what the shape was because it was like almost a directly on shot. But as we get a few other, it just looks like a shark.
I thought it was like a whale or something. Yeah, it looks like a sea creature.
It looks like a sea creature. Like it has, for all intents and purposes, fins. I think they even call it fins in this, don't they?
There are fins.
Or sails. No, they call them
sails that come up, which I thought was cool. The sails are, they refer to them as collector sails.
Yeah,
which is a great sci-fi concept. It's collecting solar energy to power it itself as it goes. And I actually don't think I've seen that in a TV series.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good. And I don't know if the design of a shark or dolphin or whatever it was supposed to be, I don't know if that makes sense for a ship, but I like that at least looked different. I'm sure it's been done in a million different science fiction things of like another creature. But I was like, oh, at least it doesn't just look like a usual boxy sort of like what's happened with a lot of like sci-fi, like post Star Wars, everything's just like, oh, it's just a chunky thing floating through air, or like, you know, an alien sort of thing.
No, great production design on it. Yeah. Like the more I saw it in action, the miniature or whatever they used to create it, the more I like the ship. I'm like, that's a very watchable ship. I would enjoy to see that ship anytime it came on screen.
But the ship, we should say, the ship is intact, but it's not functioning very well because it's been abandoned. That's the point you're getting with the ship.
Yes, the as they say, the tachyon generators are not functioning, and they're going to need to bring a special race of people who have somehow managed to hold onto their technological ability in the Dark Ages.
Yeah, they're called the Engineers.
And they're the only ones who are going to be able to get this ship started.
Yeah, and this becomes more important later, but I thought at the time, I was like, what a weird stop and halt we're just putting in the show. We literally just stop and wait for these cloaked people who, by the way, also look just like the cloakfish people from Riverworld.
They do have a lot in common with those fish people.
Same sort of production design. They're all like kind of wet fish-looking, lippy people.
Very like somewhere between Freddy Krueger and a fish or something.
Right. Anyways, like they show up. They show up, and they're the race of engineers. Not a lot of poetry, I suppose, on this planet. And they just are there to fix. They fix things. So they come on, and they're sort of just silently walking around fixing. They never really talk about why they do it or what their payment was.
They do. Well, they do actually, because there's actually a scene between these things. This is part of maybe some of the problems of it. Is they go to the ship. Tachyon generators don't work. We need to bring the engineers on. How are we going to pay them? We jump back to the steps of the archive, and basically Thorpe sneaks onto the steps of the archive, where I think this is where you can see how they had no interior set to go to. The Warlord Sean's treasure chest is just sitting on the steps.
Yeah.
And the only reason I really mention it is there's one device I really liked is he has to like pick the lock or hack the future chest. So he like holds a cell phone to his head and he just listens to the clicks as he's like.
I actually made a note too. I really like that. I wish those sorts of things I love in these because there's a inherently somewhat cheesy design to a lot of these things, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but I really wish they would up stuff like that. Like, yeah, sure, he has a weird device he puts to his ear, and that helps him hear to pick locks. Like, sure, yeah, why not? I like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much that obstacles. So someone was like, well, if we give him a little thing to put on his ear, at least it looks fun and techie as he does it, which is cool. But yeah, he basically breaks in.
I forgot about that.
Steals a whole bunch of gems from him, and I like because it was a very short sequence. It really didn't need to be there necessarily, but he steals these gems and walks away. He goes back up. The engineers come. These weird fish people. Although, did you notice this one thing about the fish people? The back of their heads are a glass dome with their exposed brains.
Oh, I didn't. I'm going to have to go back and look at that.
Very. I'm like, woof, these guys are real gross to look at.
I thought you were going to say, like, they got to really watch, like, concussions and stuff.
There's also, and I don't know, this we'll see a little later in the show. We don't really see it in this scene, but I'm going to bring it up because we're describing them. Kind of fish, Freddy Krueger looking things with the big glass dome and their brains out. But when the camera looks straight at them and their mouths open and close.
Oh, yeah.
There's like a weird webbing over their mouth. Like it's full of like saliva or something, but it's like a webbing that they speak through.
Here's what I assumed it was.
I'm holding my hand in front of my mouth as I do that.
All of them really love pizza. And when pizza comes out piping hot, they get very excited and they eat it really quick. And the cheese burns the top of their mouth, and that's just the skin hanging from.
It was a crazy choice. I loved that. I'm like, what is going on with this guy's mouth?
Yeah, every time they talk, you do see it. It just looks like it's gross. It looks like
it's a membrane.
Skin.
There's like a membrane covering their mouth as they speak through it. I've never seen that on a character design before.
It was gross.
That's amazing.
And there's another. We'll just tease you. There's another gross thing that's coming up, which was by far my favorite thing in the entire show, but it was another design thing that I liked, but we'll get to it.
So the engineers, with this payment, power up the ship, and now that they have it up, the engineers take off, and they're ready to go off into space and track down Nova, and we kind of get a first look at the bridge of the Osiris, and it's very much like, definitely inspired, I would say, by Star Trek, the original series.
It seems rather circular, and they're almost right in the middle is the captain's chair. It seems to be the only real chair you see. I think they might have, correct me, Luke, there's might be a few other chairs like near the front or around the sides.
There are stations sort of around the walls, very Star Trek, the original series side with little chairs. But yeah, in the center is this one big chair, which strangely is not the captain's chair, but the pilot's chair.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Yeah.
And it's kind of suspended and free floating with two joysticks.
Yeah. What you learn is that the ship is sort of flown very physically by the pilot. Like, they move forward, or they tilt to the side, or they move their arms, and it's clearly that the ship is not. It was an interesting concept because it seems like you actually have to really physically know how to do this to be able to fly the ship. It's not essentially pushing buttons. I don't know if that's the most effective way to fly a ship, but it was interesting nonetheless.
It's like a very expensive gaming chair that's all haptic feedback.
Right. I don't know what that means, but yes, haptic feedback. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it just like shakes and moves.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, it's fun.
Oh.
Fun thing.
Oh, and they should mention that Maggie, the girl, they say at one point her flying skills are prodigious.
Well, that's it. We've seen she can fly ships before. Like, she flew them up there. She's been flying around with Nova before. And what General Sorensen reveals here is that he's actually been training Maggie as a pilot for years just for this occasion. She was always intended to fly the Osiris when the time came.
And you now get the hint at this point that maybe the General has some sort of ulterior motive, because I actually thought at the point, I'm like, why would he be training her for all this time?
Yes. I mean, that keeps coming up, the idea that the General is a man who makes plans and has been like running some sort of long game in the intentions of something, which is our first indication here is I've trained my granddaughter for this. But while they're getting the ship powered off, Sean is discovering that Thorpe has robbed him, and he is very unhappy about it.
Yeah.
And this is where we kind of see his sort of feelings towards Thorpe a little more, because they're like, we need to go kill him. He's just like, yeah, we probably need to go kill him, but it's too bad. I really like him.
Yeah, it was interesting. But basically what it is Sean is now Warlord Derek, is just gets in his ship that he has. Daedalus, and is now following them. And it's like not a very exciting chase, but basically
they get a fun space chase, I think, because they don't have any weapons. For some reason, when the engineers restarted the ship, they didn't restart the weapons. So it's up to Maggie, basically, to fly them toward another planet in the system, the Caliban 9.
But I should mention real quick, I'm sure you caught it. What happens on the ship automatically to alert the crew that battle's going to be happening?
Oh, yes. Instead of a red alert on the Osiris, you get war drums.
Yeah, I kind of liked it. I've never seen that before. Have you?
I did like it too. I was just like, oh, that's kind of fun. And the idea
wouldn't it be really annoying though if you're just like sleeping? You have like the night shift, then don't. You'd be like, oh no, they're going to battle. I just went to bed.
Well, I mean, the red alert siren wouldn't be any better.
Fair enough.
I think any alarm would be annoying.
Yeah. But I liked it. I thought it was all right.
Yeah, it was a good concept. I guess it's good to say the Osiris is probably intended to hold probably thousands of people.
Which is weird because they clearly can fly the ship okay
with three
people, and it's the ship. You're right, at least hundreds of people designed to. And I was like, they couldn't have just like had someone in engineering or someone in something else. Like I'm assuming something is not going well if you're able to, cutbacks. I mean, I think that's sort of something maybe they would run into more over the course of the series is having to staff the ship. Yeah, perhaps
because things kind of move at such a pace as they go. Like when Daedalus attacks them, they have no weapons, and not that anyone even knows how to use them. Like they kind of are like General Sorensen and Thorpe are like, I don't even know how to use these weapons. How are they offline? We don't know. So Maggie flies them through, what do they call it here?
A fire field.
A level 13 cometary fragment bombardment, which is a planet in their sector is being hit by comets. Mm-hmm. And so as they hit, huge explosions are coming off the planet. So she's sort of like flies like through an asteroid field. She's dodging and weaving, and the Daedalus is chasing her. And finally, the Daedalus gets caught up in one of these explosions and is damaged and like shot away. They're able to escape.
Yeah.
Did you like that sequence, or you seem pretty indifferent to it?
I thought it was okay.
Okay.
I thought the special effects looked okay. I was a little disappointed they didn't kill Sean at that moment. Not that I didn't think he was an interesting character, but I just was like,
seemed like the explosion was going to.
Yes, and I was just like, oh, no, he's not. I'm like, well, it wasn't that bad a thing to have gone through if you can get hit by this huge fire thing and be okay. But
the explosions looked far more dangerous than they turned out to be.
That's what I mean. Yeah,
they maybe set those stakes at a weirdly high level for the reveal was like, oh, he maybe sort of damaged the ship.
Yeah, but this is the part where, for whatever reason, and I will admit, maybe it's my own attention span, people just start showing up on the ship at this point.
That's it. They've escaped. They're sort of flying away, trying to decide what they're going to do next. And they get an alert on the computer saying that a ship is stocked with them. And someone is aboard the ship in the officer's lounge trying to use their Nutricenter.
He wants a milkshake, doesn't he?
Yeah. The Nutricenter, a knockoff of the Replicator. That first 30 minutes is a knockoff of Star Wars. And the final 45 minutes of the show is a knockoff of Star Trek.
Yeah.
They really combine the two ideas together.
Like, we'll get all the fans.
But yes, they rush down. And it's funny because as they're on their way there, they're talking about how do we get the weapons online again. And Thorpe's like, I know a guy who can do it. And when they throw open the doors to the officers' quarters, there is Wally Bryce, the exact friend that Thorpe was just talking about.
Yeah. And what we learn about him is he has the ability to sense things.
Yes, he talks about how he has feelings and coincidences that help drive him forward, but he does not want to be called a telepath or a psychic. He hates that. He just has fairly reliable feelings.
That was weird. I mean, it was clearly something they were going to develop later on, and kind of you get a better sense of what that means. But it's just like, he's got hunches.
I love that. The idea of a character whose hunches are just like abnormally reliable. That's a fun idea for a character.
Yeah, okay.
Where his hunches are they're pretty good.
I just figure so like he's good at cards, he's good at poker.
Yeah, just if he has a hunch, you can kind of go with it. He's a little bit of the Lando Calrissian, I think. He's just like he's a bit of a scoundrel, but like it's because he's good at things because he's a little psychic.
Right. And but we don't even get a time to really meet him because two more characters show up and one doesn't have nipples.
Well, here's the thing. Yeah, he's going to be able to get the weapons back online, and he does. He goes and helps him with that. And they're telling him about their problems with Nova going missing and what's happening. And Wally's like, well, that's a happy coincidence because what we're going to need to get Nova back is a good arbitrator, which I guess in this world, an arbitrator is a very important job because they negotiate conflicts between races, maybe?
Yeah, I assume there was some sort of like intergalactic lawyer.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I've never seen this in a show before. The idea was like, there's someone who's just really good at finding solutions to problems. Like they're very good at negotiating with people. And he just happens to have one on his ship. And it's Rulacor. We're introduced to this now fourth or fifth character on the show who is traveling with her associate, Jana, a Zentric.
Yeah, and she doesn't have nipples.
It's very true. Zentrics, I guess, don't speak. So what we have is tall blonde woman whose costume is clearly designed to appear as if her breasts are completely exposed, but nippleless.
Yeah.
It was such an odd costume choice because the rest of the show, it just doesn't lean in that direction.
Yeah, it was weird. But here's the thing I'll say about the costumes. We should mention it now. In one way, I really liked the costumes. And what I liked about it was each person was clearly very distinct in their design, and there was a thought about it. A lot of times when you're watching these kind of shows, I find the costumes end up being really bland and boring, and everyone sort of looks the same. It's like, oh, they're all wearing a gray jumpsuit or whatever it might be. And in this show, like, what's the arbitrator's name?
Rulacor.
She's wearing like a corset. I don't know why. And old nipple woman, she's got her weird exposed breast costumes, and the other guys, John Corbett's dressed like Errol Flynn for some reason, and the general's in his thing, so they all look distinct. Now, I don't know if it seems to be a shorthand or a quick way to tell you something about the character that maybe is not entirely earned, but I do like that they all at least uniquely look different.
Yeah, I don't think it's a fault to have a way of showing someone who this character is without having them have a lot of exposition is a great way of handling it. Like, I think the costume designers did a great job.
I don't know. I say it was okay.
Also, how do you know she's the only character who's nippleless?
You know what? You're right. I mean, she's the only one who's proudly nippleless.
Okay. We don't know
if in the future
Thorpe has any nipples.
They might have 2 belly buttons.
Who knows? We don't know.
Yeah,
we
don't
can't
know.
see it.
Yeah, it's true.
The costume design is that good. They're completely clothed.
Okay, all right. But what do we find out about Rumacor? What's her name?
Well, this is the big twist here, is that Rulacor is not just a negotiator. She's the daughter of the general and Maggie Sorensen's deadbeat mom.
Yeah, there's a lot of coincidences you kind of have to hand wave over on this, but yeah, sure.
I mean, it's that tough thing of a pilot. They're trying to set up all the characters and get them all in the same place, and they really maybe hand wave a little too hard here by having a ship show up thanks to a hunch that happens to have all of your characters you're going to need for the rest of the show get off. But yeah.
You know what they could have done is maybe spent a few less trips of him going back and forth that staircase and spent a little more time introducing the characters.
That is true. But we kind of get not a bad scene here, an interesting scene where Rula tries to get together with her daughter and kind of talk to her and try to win her over because Maggie does not like her. Maggie's very unhappy to see her mother there.
Well, they've more than implied that the mom essentially abandoned her.
Yeah, apparently after her husband died and Maggie's father in the Baton-Katos War.
That sounds fun.
She couldn't take it, so she kind of went off to live her own life and find that and left it to be raised by her father. So Maggie has some hard feelings there. Rula feels like her dad has like turned her daughter against her. Like she feels like there's, a bit of stuff. I mean, all of that's fair. And Rula is maybe not the greatest at talking to her daughter. Did you hear her first line to her daughter when she walks in?
No, what was it?
I think she's trying to say like, put yourself in my shoes. But the way she phrases it, like the first line I think she says is, could you see yourself having kids in a few years?
Oh yeah, that's right.
She's 14.
What I liked about it was the note I put is she's an arbitrator. Her job is to like negotiate and clearly know a lot about how people feel and talk and body language, and she's clearly discussing with different cultures and races and species, but she does not know how to approach her daughter at all, and I thought that was kind of funny. I don't know if that was intended that way, as of like, look at her real blind spot she has, or just some bad writing.
I mean, I think you're right. I think it's intended as a blind spot, but teenagers, am I right?
Yeah. Teenagers that you've left on a planet as you've gone off to wear corsets and
that's always going to be a hard one to arbitrate, I think.
Yeah.
The daughter you've abandoned.
Yeah, okay.
So this really that's it. Like we kind of have introduced all our leads, their relationships to each other, and the rest of the plot starts kicking off very abruptly when this crazy cloaked planet like uncloaks in front of them in a pretty good effect. Like,
yeah, I thought so too.
On the view screen, this planet just like appears and it's all like techie, a little like a Borg sphere or something. Mm-hmm. And what we come to learn very quickly is this is the homeworld of the engineers.
So were they implying that no one knows where the engineers...
They had implied that. They don't know where they're from. They don't know much about them. And what we're seeing here is it's because their homeworld is this free-floating planet now. They're so technologically advanced they've turned their planet into a spaceship that is cloaked and just travels the universe.
Right. Okay. Maybe I missed that.
Yeah, no, I think that is 100% the idea behind it. I'm not sure if it was driven home quite as hard as it could have been, but as I thought about it, I'm like, right, this is see, and this is kind of interesting, is they have a whole bunch of cool little sci-fi concepts that are in here that are almost set aside too much, and they sort of lean into like, here's our replicator, just like Star Trek, or here's our, as we're going to see soon, teleporter, just like Star Trek. Whereas they've got cool ideas like the collector panels that power the ship. I'm like, I haven't seen it on a sci-fi show. I'd like to know more about those. Here's a free floating planet. Like, I think you could get a lot of grist out of that mill. But I don't know if I think they maybe lean on the wrong elements that are interesting and maybe fall back on a few that are too cliche.
But at this point, they get essentially hailed by the planet.
Yeah. And their leader, I think it was their leader anyway, a guy named Shakla.
They say he's the elder of the Society of Engineers. That's what they say.
There we go. Shakla, the elder of the Society of Engineers. He explains to them, we've got Nova. It's not a kidnapping. Prove it. We're going to invite you down to the planet. You're the first visitors ever to come to our home planet. Sorry about all this confusion. Like, we're going to straighten this all out with you.
We know we took her in the middle of the night and it looked really weird. Trust me, it's not weird at all. Everything's transparent. Come on down.
I did kind of like, it was very much just like, hey, listen, our bad. It's not like they showed up and were like hostile. They're like, hey, listen, you guys, we made a mistake.
Also, I know it's a little distracting to see me talk when I have this weird skin stuff flapping into my lips. Don't worry about that.
My weird mouth skin flap. Perfectly normal.
We all have it. Don't worry. Watch us kiss. It's disgusting.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, interesting. Right? Find that fan art, Jordan.
Oh, yeah. I'm already writing my fan fiction. What do you call slash fiction?
Yeah, sure.
Two of the elders just
making out
with their little weird. I never see their tongues. I assume they have funny little tongues too.
Oh yeah, probably
protruding through the
little
membrane.
popping through the little membrane.
Oh, gross.
So now that the team's assembled, they're like, all right, we're gonna go down there. We don't trust these engineers. We don't know what's going on. Rulikor, being a negotiator, has this special tech she's developed that she sort of takes a big plunger or like injector and it sort of shoots this thing into everybody's brain.
Mm-hmm. It's like essentially.
It turns your brain waves into like a broadcast of audio visual.
Right.
I mean, that's how you describe it.
It's so someone can watch what you're seeing at all times.
One of the things I actually really liked about the show was sort of how they dealt with this is we see her injecting them and we cut back to the bridge where Maggie's flying the ship and we have a screen up and what we're now seeing is everyone's POV. Mm-hmm. And like
bubbles inside.
There's little bubbles inside of them, like picture-in-picture bubbles for everyone's POV, and then the main POV is up, and they can switch between them. But they're all kind of nice POVs, and I could see like you could use that to some very cool episode effects if you needed to do like a scary aliens episode where you're like on a dark ship wandering around, and you could like have just these POVs going. And it was an interesting piece. It doesn't come into play enough.
Yeah, they just sort of do it, and then they go, all right, there's a thing, done. The show has, I think you mentioned it not too long ago, but they do lean on maybe the less interesting things and like, oh, that's a kind of cool bit of technology. There's a cool thing. But they seem to go, yeah, don't worry about that. I know we showed you a cool thing. We spent a bunch of money on it. Next.
Yeah. And I mean, the next piece of technology comes up because they're like, let's go to the planet. And they are like, do you guys have a spatial transverse system? Mm-hmm. And they're like, we do. And they actually have a conversation where they're like, oh, it's not a transporter. We used to break down people's molecules and move them across space and rebuild them, but there were a lot of accidents doing that. A real kind of jab at Star Trek. But the thing they're premising here is pretty good. They're talking about folding space.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, this spatial transverse thing, it basically folds space so that you just go to the place you're supposed to go to. I mean, the question becomes like, I'm sure they would get into it. It's like, maybe you can only do it over short periods of time. I'm like, why don't all your ships just fold time? Why travel through space? Just fold space. But the premise is what we see is when they go through it, we get a wavy effect to like they're going through like an ocean or something, and then they pop up on the other side. And I thought at least that was a nice way of taking a spin on a transporter in a new way, and I think folding space is an interesting
and the effect is kind of cool. They got this yellowy swirl thing that goes around them.
Yeah, it was a neat idea and a neat effect and a nice way of handling a transporter that's not a transporter. And then I guess also giving you the chance to get a dig in at Star Trek, which was a lot of these shows love to do. Because what show did it last? Oh, it was Space Above and Beyond. Was taking a dig at the holodeck.
But also
come at the king, man. You come at the king, you get burned.
I guess that's what it is. Yeah, but it's I don't know, Doesn't everyone love the holodeck? It's not like people like hate that. It's like that's a fun concept.
No, and I mean, you have to look at the shows that are doing it too. Like none of them survived.
Right.
It's just like, what? I mean, I get it. You're different, but like, maybe don't challenge the biggest thing in science fiction.
Right.
It doesn't seem to work out for you.
Yeah. So, anyways, we get down to the engineer's planet. Did they ever say what the planet's called?
You know what? I didn't catch it if they did. It just seems to be referred to as their planet.
Right.
And it's interesting. They land on the planet. They meet this fella.
Well, I think we'll just call it Genesis 2.
Genesis 2. All right, sure. They land in and meet this fella, Chakla. And there's a fun thing here where he's like, let me give you a tour of our society and explain our society to you. And then they just like jump forward 45 minutes. And he's like, and that's it.
Yeah. And they're back into like, because they have one set, which is like another circular set. It almost looks like, not like a gladiator thing, but it's very circular. And there's like, I don't know. There's like little rooms off to the side sort of thing. And that's the basic, only really part you've ever see of the planet.
Yeah. I mean, they had enough for a couple sets. You know what? I'm going to be honest. I didn't hate that they skipped that whole exposition. I mean, I was curious. I'd like to know more about their thing, but I was glad they weren't like, now let's, like Genesis 2, do a walk around tour where we explain everything to you.
Yeah.
It was kind of acknowledging it's like, maybe we'll skip that much exposition and move on, because really they still do a ton of exposition moving forward. Because what it boils down to is the engineers as a species have rejected emotion because emotion causes extremes like tribalism and nationalism and cause fighting, which similar to the downfall of the Republic, which they've seen, they're trying to weed out of their society. They prefer to think of themselves as like cogs in a machine.
And they're very progressive. They even mentioned at one point they're working to remove gender identity. Very progressive.
Well, not even gender identity. They're just trying to stop gender. Like They want to get rid of the idea of gender because there's the fighting that comes between genders, I guess, is the theory behind this 1998
Although, to be fair,
thing.
Could you tell the difference between the female and male
No,
these engineers?
If you had asked me, no. And
there'd be a real awkward dates happening.
Yeah. Of course, everything seems okay until he talks about removing gender, at which point Thorpe's like, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Real Jake Cordigan or the guy from Genesis, like,
Yeah.
no lust. Oh, slow down there.
Hold on. I was already halfway there. Stop.
And to that end, they have Nova. They've been re-educating her to kind of agree with their point of view on things. And they're a little suspicious because I guess what they're doing to get her to stop this is what they call it narco-neural repatterning to re-educate her. So they're kind of like brainwashing her, basically.
Right.
But part of the reason they had to take her is they haven't perfected this genderless society with no sexual breeding yet. So in order to survive as a species, they have to like take, kids who excel, geniuses, and bring them into their society to, fulfill this like higher cause, as they need smart people to help move them forward. And since they haven't sorted out asexual breeding yet, this is the only way.
What do you think of that plan? Does that seem like a plan is foolproof?
Well, what we see is this neuro repatterning they're doing is killing like half of the kids who do it. And I was like, it's not that hard to test tube a baby, you guys.
Yeah.
Like I was just like, there's one of these technologies is much more difficult than the other, and you guys have chosen the most difficult one to try to perfect. You could easily just clone each other. It's not that hard.
Right.
The European nations haven't stopped you yet.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the what do they call this in the intergalactic whatever? They probably don't have any rules against cloning.
Well, I mean, not on this planet.
Not on this planet.
No one knows where it is.
Yeah.
Try to enforce a rule here. I'm going to make a quick note here because I watched this anyway on YouTube.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah.
After I watched it, I kind of scrolled through because someone had posted this maybe 5-ish years ago. It's the only thing he'd ever posted. And he was very active in his own comments. And there was a ton of comments on it. People were really chatting about it. But what was really weird is in the last like 6 months to a year, like there's a whole bunch of fresh comments. And people are going insane about this genderless society thing. They're like, these are Democrats. Like they're drawing so many allegories to this 1998 show. There's like so much stuff in these comments about this is what they're trying to do to us. Turn us to this genderless society. We're all cogs machines. We got to stand up to them. They're monsters. Just like this show
people are
shows
really
us.
Rewatching and seeing what they want to see.
Yeah, there's this weird science fiction nerd subset who is obviously very weird and in their own way trying to close down some of these ideas, and they've really found this show and are rallying around it.
To be fair, I think the worst thing you can probably do is spend time reading comments on YouTube videos.
It's true. I was just blown away by how many people have stumbled across this show 20 years later and have decided this is an allegory for 2018.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you now, it's not.
Well, that's what I'm just like. I'm like, you guys, this is a stretch at best.
Yeah. So are we almost at my favorite part?
We're nearly at your favorite part, Jordan, because Nova is so special. The engineers love her so much. She's such a genius. She's even being considered to be the first outsider ever to join the Sublime Planum.
Oh, yeah. Is that what they call it? That's what they call it?
I'm trying to remember the pronunciation, but I believe it is the Planum. The Planum? Something like that. It's the Sublime. I'm going to call it the Sublime Planum. And it is, you're right, the best part of this show.
Yeah, it is. And I know they spent a lot of money on it. And I thought it looked wonderful. I'm going to describe it. It is a weird organism that sort of looks like a dermoid or like a poop person thing. What would you call it?
I called it a huge, gross, pulsating blob with tentacles and faces spooging out of it.
Yeah, that's about as good a description as you're gonna get. And it looked great. It looked like something out of The Thing or something like that. Like
that's a good one. It definitely like
very
The Thing,
Cronenberg, like just gross and weird.
The Blob.
And also, up to this point in the show really hasn't done anything like that. Like it's like. You know what I mean? Like they've had a couple different alien races, and yes, they have this weird membrane on their mouth. But suddenly it's like, hey, by the way, gross thing, and you're like, holy moly!
Yeah, it's a huge like interactive Muppet that like it looks like David Cronenberg or David Lynch came up with it or something because the faces like squish out of the membrane and talk to them.
Yeah.
And
it look honestly, I haven't seen anything like that, but I thought it looked great.
Oh, it looked amazing. Like I'll give you a little information about the Planum, which I believe is how it's pronounced. Is essentially it is an organic computer of some sort. They basically transfer the greatest engineers, like the smartest and best of society, into it, or as they call it, their souls into it, so that they can hold on to their collective knowledge over time. Like it's it makes sense. It's a way to put the best of the best into a place so that you can always have access to it and it can help guide your society. And there's a weird claim at some point where they're like, oh yeah, don't worry about the Planum. It's inert. And I'm like, it's clearly not inert. And Wally, our hunch-having psychic friend, it turns to someone, I think Duke Thorpe, and says, oh no, that's alive and that's in pain.
Yeah, well, it's weird that they do mention, because one, I don't know why you'd ever show anyone that and have this clearly bad lie. Like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. It's not alive. And it's like, it's clearly like a pulsating organ. Like it's clearly alive and there's heads coming out of it and talking. It's alive. I mean, it may not have...
It's not alive in the way we know.
Yes, but it's... Yeah,
something's going on.
But it is weird they said it's in pain, because you don't get a sense of that. But I mean, This guy's got a hunch that... But really what you were, as a viewer, supposed to get is there's something very unnatural and unholy about this thing.
Exactly. And, it's fun because it is really interesting. Like, why would you show these to these people? But it really shows the engineers are almost naive in their outlook on the world. Like, they think they've come up with a perfect society and like come meet our Planum. Isn't it great? And it's like, no, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare come to life. And they're like, no, it looks pretty cool, right?
Yeah. You didn't see his tentacle slopping over there? Did you see the tentacle? It's just oozing pus on the floor.
Isn't that cool? Don't you like that? But the Planum / the engineers sort of explains the philosophy with its like weird faces sticking out of membranes. It's like basically what they're going to do is force order on the universe by pushing these ideas of like being a cog in the machine and how it's going to work. And that's sort of their plan. So like, yeah, we're about to go over and fix the universe with our cool philosophy. I believe at one point they're like, well, what if we don't want that? And they give the line, I think the Planum says this, is like, those who resist will be compelled, which is a real poor man's resistance is futile.
Yeah. Can you imagine the poor come? Resistance is you. What's the phrase?
Those who resist will be compelled.
Yeah. Well, it's not nicer. Come on. Don't resist.
Just be compelled. And of course, our team from the Osiris is just not into it. So the engineers are like, all right, fine, murder them.
Yeah.
just murder them, I guess.
They didn't plan on humans being so tricky.
They didn't plan on that, and they didn't plan on Warlord Sean showing up.
Yeah, it came back. It looks like everything's okay on the ship with that minor fender bender they had with that
they got
asteroid.
It all fixed up. Their insurance company came by and gave them a quote. And they show up, and they're like, basically, Maggie and Jana, the silent mute, is still on the ship. And they're like, hey, where's Thorpe? A little pissed off about those jewels he stole. They're like, he's down on that planet there, and they're going to kill him. And he like hails down to the engineers. I think he says something like, I couldn't find the exact quote, but he says something like, hey, there's a line to settle scores with Thorpe, and I'm at the front of it. It really shows he kind of likes Thor. He's just like,
Yeah.
hey, you can't kill that guy. That guy's my guy to kill. He's my buddy. I'm going to kill him. And he goes down and starts shooting up the planet, essentially giving them the chance to escape the engineers and make a run for it. And Thorpe uses the biocrystal he picked up from Dick Miller to try to like de-brainwash Nova.
It's a bad name, by the way. Dick
Oh,
Miller.
really? I think it's a great name.
Dick Miller?
Yeah. Who wouldn't like that name?
It just seems like someone whose job is to produce dicks.
I thought he was like a cool detective.
Oh, Dick Miller? Mm.
You just picture a man.
What does your
at a
dad do
mill?
again? Oh, let's stop talking. No. What does your dad do? He's a miller. A miller? Where's he working at the factory? He works in the dick factory.
Wouldn't that mean just grinding things up? Like this milling?
Yeah,
like
he's
making flour, dick
Well,
flour?
that's what that old dermoid thing's made out of. The Dick Millers have been making them.
Your brain, it goes to weird places.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I like it. But yeah, he uses this biocrystal to show Nova, which, you know, that classic way we've seen in all these shows of like deprogramming someone who's been brainwashed. Like, but what about this? Won't this fix your brainwashing?
Yeah. You know what this reminded me a lot of? Do you remember way back in Tech War where
Of course.
the partner was turned into
thought
a
she was a
mafia person?
gangster, yeah.
It was a similar sort of thing. Only I think in that, didn't Jake just strangle it out of her?
Yeah, he just strangles it out of her. He's just like, you are not a gangster. And
But it's
she's
the same sort of thing. The person is brainwashed and you just, something is done to compel them to.
Yeah. She sees something she's always wanted, this biocrit, and remembers, my brother loves me, so families are good, unlike my brainwashing told me. But unfortunately, and I thought oddly, I mean, I guess it's because it was shot and they were trying to, for a pilot, and they were trying to fix this. But as they're about to transverse back to the ship, they're all getting in the wavy thing, and the engineers run up and like just pull her out of it. So they don't rescue Nova. She's kind of just tugged out of the spatial fold and pulled back to the engineer ship, and they lose her again. And interesting, I mean, it's tough when this is a one-off movie because you're like, you had just let her leave, you would have solved the problem. But
Yeah.
I guess because they were planning this to constantly be a problem in the series, always trying to
Well,
get her
that was
back.
what I thought. I'm like, is literally the premise of the show going to be he's always trying to save his sister? Because that seemed like a one episode thing. He saved his sister, but now we know that the engineers are the bad guy. They're going to always be set up as a bad guy, and maybe they'll do other things. But it's like, oh no, he's just always going to be trying to save her.
Yeah, because they're going to be an invading force now. We know they're coming after the universe. I don't know if we need to do that extra level of like, also, I want to save my sister. It's like, you just save the sister now, and then that's fine. We can spend the rest of the time fighting these awful engineers. Yeah, it was an odd choice to add that stakes that we've just solved back into the show. Anyway, they get back to the ship. Thorpe, obviously, he's a brother. He wants to go back into his sister, but they're outgunned and outmanned, and the general has to stun him with his stun gun because he can't risk this crazy person like driving them into the planet, because basically the general has a plan, and that plan is they really need to rally the Republican loyalists that are left to basically fight this engineer threat that's coming, this thing that no one sees coming.
Yeah. Well, at this point, this is when we learn that he's sort of had, as you mentioned, he's had a long game going for a long time, which is he wants to rebuild the Republic as a defensive force, or have the universe back into a sense of order.
He just wants the Republic back.
Yeah, and the whole thing of getting Thorpe and all, the whole, he really, saving the sister was a secondary plan for him. It wasn't as important.
Yeah, it's all part of the longer thing is hopefully he'll get the Republic back. And now they need it more than ever because there is a huge external threat and they have no defense against it. And he kind of gets into the long-term plan was there is one last grandson remaining of, I wrote it down here, it's so complicated.
I know. I had to actually read about this after because the plan is so convoluted, and it seems weird that they're just going to drop it in a bunch of dialogue at the end of the episode.
Well, they drop it a little earlier on and then come back. Like, I had to go back a couple times to find all the information, but he has basically squirreled away the grandson of the last proconsul of the Republic, Junius Cabell. Mm-hmm. They're like, we got to get this grandson. He'll be the focus point. Like, all of the Republic loyalists will be like, that's our leader. It is very strange to me. I'm like, we're going to get this Roman Empire back off the ground.
Yeah. But the idea is, am I wrong, Luke? The idea is we're going to get a guy who everyone can rally behind and
rebuild the Republic.
Yeah. And there's only really one guy who can do that. And everyone will look at that and go, yes, oh, he's the guy. And
he's the king's son. He's like, the king's back.
Right.
You know, I would argue one of the reasons your Republic probably fell apart, maybe you shouldn't have followed a single individual, but that's fine. I understand your logic, I guess. And they basically take the Osiris off to the planet that they've stored this grandson on. But as they're arriving, they get like a call from the planet, and the engineers are already there. They're wiping the planet off the face of the universe. And the woman who basically was left in charge does one last big reveal of the episode. Mm-hmm. Do you want to give it to us?
Yeah, the future king, or whoever you call it, is actually Sean.
Yeah, a warlord Sean ran away from his responsibility years ago and has changed his name to Warlord Sean from whatever Cabell name he had before.
Yeah.
And he is their only hope of getting the Republic back together.
Mm-hmm. What a twist.
What a twist. And I was, you know what? I was grateful.
I didn't see it coming.
I thought maybe because they had implied that Thorpe had been abandoned by his family, I thought maybe we were going to learn it was Thorpe at some point. But I, for some reason, was really charmed by this Warlord. So when I found out the Warlord was also like key to this show,
Well, it was
like,
nice
great.
that what you as a viewer expect is the classic, guess what? This ragtag group, the guy who's like the Han Solo, he's the king we've all been waiting for. It's like, oh, I haven't seen that before. But they didn't go in that direction. To their credit, they went, hey, remember this other weird minor character who is like, he's the king. It's like, oh, that was. And so I like that they did something different.
I mean, I guess we could have guessed it by the title of the show, The Warlord, but we didn't, so they got us.
Yeah.
Thorpe is now forced to go back to Caliban 6, his home world, to basically ask Sean's help. They have a fun electricity whip fight for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Like Thorpe or Sean's got an electricity whip, and he just keeps trying to whip Thorpe with it.
It's very much like, remember the first time the Ferengi showed up in Star Trek? They had those little electric whips? Yeah, it was like that.
But Sean comes around, like they tell him his home planet where he grew up and the woman who raised him died. And he kind of like, all right, well, you're right. We need to talk about this. This is obviously bigger than just our little feud. And, you know, I also kind of like you anyway. Like we're buddies, so let's do this. But basically all Sean will agree to is like he's going to think about this Republic thing. He's not 100% convinced. He left that life. He doesn't want to be that. He doesn't want to follow in his father's footsteps or his grandfather's footsteps. But he's not against it. He's going to help out where he can. He also doesn't want the Osiris, and he's going to leave that to Thorpe. He's like, Thorpe, this is yours. You're in charge now of putting together a fleet. Maybe I'll help out. Maybe I won't. I got to think about it a little bit. But this is yours now. You're off to go into the future and fight the engineer threat.
Or save your sister, because apparently that's the plot.
Or both of them, yeah, I guess. And it kind of ends here because he's basically left with this challenge. Thorpe has to defeat the engineers, save his sister, and it ends with another voiceover because it's just like, you know, front end, back end voiceover. And the last line of is Thorpe saying, and that's the story these chronicles will tell. And I was just like, that's weird. They're not going to tell that. And also, it's not called the Osiris Chronicles in this pilot.
Well, it was... Yeah, and it was weird that, I mean, from what, again, we had talked about from the very beginning of this podcast, is that this was recut to be a TV movie, but it doesn't play like a TV movie. It plays exactly like an extended pilot.
Well, here's what's interesting about those YouTube comments. In between all the craziness, there are several people weighing in the YouTube comments saying, hey, I've seen this before, but the version I saw had a narration by the Warlord.
Oh, really?
And a different name. So there's another version of this pilot that was cut that aired somewhere that was done from the Warlord's perspective in the voiceovers.
Oh, really? Oh, I'm going to have to try to find that. I didn't realize that.
In some ways makes so much more sense. Like
I do like the idea of that sort of bait and switch. You keep seeing the story. It's like, oh, but by the way, he's not the main person. I wonder if that would be better.
Well, I think it would be fine with Thorpe still leading it and like this side character who we know will eventually need to rise to his ranks. But it doesn't make more sense to be like the final reveal being like, and that's why I sent Thorpe off to do this, because I'm trying to decide if this is my, I don't know, something. So it's interesting. People who commented on it seem to prefer the other voiceover, probably because it maybe tied things together a little cleaner. I'm not sure. Anyway, very interesting that there's some secret other version out there, perhaps going by the Osiris Chronicles.
I'm going to see if I can find it
right now.
I was looking right now.
But yeah, I mean, that wraps up the show, and we can maybe get some final thoughts and do the ratings, I guess, because I don't have a lot more to talk about. I
think, here's what I think. I think you liked it more than I did. I thought there was a lot of nuggets of some fun things, and I think there was clearly some talent involved, but I think the execution missed the mark a little bit, and I don't know if it was just, I don't know, I have to think about it more. I don't know if it was too much was jammed in, there was not enough jammed in, but it had some pacing issues, it had some plot issues, but I didn't hate it.
Script-wise, it was definitely a mixed bag. It suffered from the things that I think we just see in general in pilots as having to do a lot in a little space of time. Some of the stuff was really good. Some of it was a little too cliche. Overall, though, like the production design for me, it wasn't like the greatest production design. It's a little cheesy, a little stuff, but like fun science fiction
they did
design.
go for it, and I like that.
I mean, we moved past it pretty quickly, but even like little things where we meet Wally, the sidekick to Thorpe, is like one of your favorite things. The thing he's ordering out of that machine is a Gelinar Supreme, which is this weird looking drink in a weird looking cup.
Yeah, I like those things.
Like all kinds of little touches that like clearly show that someone was like, it's a little bit of a fun sci-fi, so we're gonna have some weird like Flash Gordon-y or like weird throwback stuff, and then we're gonna have a weird blob monster that comes out, and like even just the production design on like the costumes and the character faces, like stuff was working.
Maybe it's an unfair criticism. I wish they almost leaned into it more, because and it could have just been that maybe there just wasn't a budget for it, or maybe there just wasn't enough time for it. But those sort of things that worked, I felt there just wasn't enough of them.
I think there was enough for me. I think it was there. I think getting Joe Dante to make this was the right call. I think he brought the fun and love that he brings into like a Gremlins or something, because there was cool effects and cool ideas and cool things happening. It just, it was hit or miss with the script. I think because it was so plot heavy and they were just trying to force so many things into it that it just meant like bam, bam, bam. And then they made some errors in that script where they're like sent a little too much back and forth at the beginning. It's like, go to the Warlord steps, go back home. Go to the Warlord steps, go to the spaceship. Go to the Warlord steps, go back to the spaceship. Like there's a lot of just jumping back and forth that could have been. And once they get past that and put the people on the ship, they jump right into it.
I actually marked it. Once they hit about the 33-minute mark is when things kind of took off. The first 30 minutes of the show was a lot of setup, but not a lot of important setup. Like you're saying, like a lot of, it felt shoe leather, as it were.
It was like a little Genesis 2-y for the start. I thought that's all we were going to get was like kind of these pretty good sets, but nothing like spectacular. But kind of once we get up to the ship and start seeing it unravel into this giant space whale.
And something I read, and I don't know if it's true or not, is that a bunch of these sets on this were repurposed for Andromeda. That they took them and just like redressed them.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if that's true, but I saw a thing and they were showing pictures of again, I not having seen Andromeda, pictures of their bridge and the other bridge. They do look very, very similar.
What's interesting too is a lot of these YouTube comments provided me a lot of insight. A lot of people in the YouTube comments were talking even about how plot-wise it felt like Andromeda. And I haven't seen it. I mean, I probably saw one ages ago, but I just don't remember it at all. So maybe pieces of it, like you said, apparently Paramount was trying desperately to turn this into something.
Yeah, so maybe they were like, well, let's just retool it into something else.
Yeah, we've got the sets. Let's tear down the details and rebuild it as something else. And they brought someone in. I mean, I don't know. Interesting, though.
Maybe we'll find out when we watch Andromeda.
Ooh, one day.
Yeah, one day.
Not next week, though.
No. Nope.
All right, Jordan, what do you want to rate The Warlord Battle for the Galaxy?
I'll tell you. You tell me first what you give it.
I'm going to give it a 7. I think...
I knew you were going to go higher than me.
If it had gone to series, they would have had to fix a lot of problems and like to make it work. But I think for an hour and a half of the shows we've watched before, there was a lot for me to enjoy as I watched it. I had a great time, particularly as we got further into the episode. The character turns were good. The relationships between the Warlord and Thorpe were good. The crazy engineers turned out to be more and more exciting the more I got to see of them.
See, I'm kind of... At first, I thought I was giving it about a 5.5. But now I'm thinking, mate, you might have convinced me a little bit more. So I think I'm going to give it a 6. I think your enjoyment of it has pulled my ranking up a little bit more. But I do feel the second half was much better than the first half. And if they had trimmed it down and just kind of got going, and it's funny because when I was watching it and the part where the engineers came and fixed the ship and stuff, I was like, who cares? Just move on, have the ship work. And I realized that's a plot point later on. But at the time I was like, geez, how much time are we going to spend with these guys fixing a ship and stuff? And there was moments like that where I was like, all right, guys, let's get to it.
You're not wrong. It wasn't a perfect script, a perfect pilot. And I think what you're saying is it was retooled so many times. I mean, who knows if there was ever actually a great pilot there? Probably not. But yeah, it certainly has a long time finding its legs. And even when it does, there's pretty shaky still. But from a watching perspective, I had a good time watching it.
I did too. It wasn't a drag to get through.
Yeah. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Next week, we'll be back. We're going to go into a new series. We're going to watch Galactica 1980.
Yeah, 1980. How science fiction-y.
It's the future.
It's the most scientific year there was.
But in the meantime, if you want to tell us anything we've missed about Warlord here or Osiris Chronicles, you can email us at continuumdrag@gmail.com. And I think our Instagram and Twitter will be full of some pretty cool, gross blobby things.
Yeah, if it was all up to me, it would just be every day would just be another shot of that blob thing.
I've got great news for you, Jordan. It is up to you.
Oh, that's true. Oh, here we go.
Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at continuumdrag to see how much blob Jordan puts up. And thanks for listening. And Jordan, will see you next week.
Yeah, I'll see you then.
All right, bye. Continuum Drag is recorded at Astrolab Studios in Toronto, Ontario. Theme music by James Ruxfiedler. Produced by Jordan Delic and Luke Black. Special thanks to Adam Wheatner, Jeff Hanley, and Dwayne Wright.